What's up, weather fans? In today's video, we are diving deep into the upcoming pattern, taking a look at a major Arctic blast that's expected for the latter half of November, and the models are starting to light up with some seriously cold air because of it. But here's the kicker. The potential for some big-time snow events is also on the table throughout the central and eastern states, and we're going to break all of that down today. But first things first, let's check out the current conditions. You can see two main zones of stormy weather. Now, I'd say both are on the minor side for now. We've got some unsettled weather stacked up all along the western states, with shower activity popping up from the southwest all the way to the northwest, coming down as both rain and snow, depending on your elevation. And over here, you can see a low just off the coastline of Maine, and it's kicking up all sorts of shower activity for the Great Lakes, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, and even into eastern Canada. And this is also a mix of snow and rain, depending on exactly where you are. For the most part, the southern spots are getting rain, while the northern areas are seeing the snow from this particular system. Now, when we pull up the satellite imagery, this is where things get really interesting. We can actually see a lot of the jet stream's influence. You can really get a feel for what we're expecting right here on the screen. You can almost trace the flow, and as I draw it out for you, you'll really see this particular pattern taking shape across the states. What we're looking at is primarily a ridge over the western states, and a trough digging into the east. Now, there isn't a ton of Arctic air fueling this trough in the east just yet, so you've got some colder air in the northeast, but I can tell you, from the southern mid-Atlantic, or northern southeast, we're kind of in between, but here in Virginia, it was 70 degrees today. It was absolutely stunning, just incredibly warm. So it really depends on where you are, but the general flow is an upward bend in the west and a downward dip in the east. All right, let's go ahead and talk about how the past 15 days have played out overall. And you can see things are starting to balance out a bit more. Still, the bigger picture here is warmer in the west. That part of the story is holding true. It's a pattern we've been tracking, and it's staying put. Meanwhile, the east has generally had a colder look. That's what we've been dealing with, but it's getting a bit watered down by the warmth we've seen over the last few days. And that trend is set to continue for the next week or so, maybe even 10 days. After that, though, we do expect things to cool back down, just in time for that final stretch of November. So let's shift gears and talk about what's coming up. Looking here at our European model, and by the way, we're going to see a massive snowstorm pop up at the end of this model run. We can see this stormy weather continues for tomorrow out west. Again, a mix of rain and snow, all depending on where you are. Things in the northeast are quieting down a little, but we can still see that downward flow. And check this out, we can actually see a lot of Arctic air just bottled up here for the Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. The further north you go, the more potent that cold becomes. There's a really sharp dividing line somewhere between these two areas, where you go from these beautifully warm temperatures to dramatically colder conditions, just a short trip northward. Now, looking forward to Tuesday, the 18th, we can see a bit more storminess brewing. There's a separate system popping up for the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Mid-Atlantic that's bringing mostly rainfall. We might see some snowfall for the upper Midwest and Great Lakes. But that's a pretty narrow band. The main story here is rain showers across a lot of the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Mid-Atlantic from that one. The Southwest especially, but really the whole West, is seeing this stormy pattern continue all the way through Tuesday. Now, let's take a look at Wednesday, the 19th. And yep, the West is still dealing with activity, so that's not ending anytime soon. You can see the jet stream is much flatter by this time frame, so it's kind of an even playing field across the country by Wednesday the 19th. Then on Thursday the 20th, we're going to be watching for some more dramatic storm systems. Believe it or not, the West is about to get even more active. Again, we're talking mountain snow and lower elevation rain. We also see a low trying to spin up between Kansas and Oklahoma here, and this one would feature that classic cold front, warm front dynamic. This would ramp up the risk for potential thunderstorm activity and even some severe weather across the south-central states. Now, looking at this other low between the Great Lakes and Hudson Bay, you can tell it has some influence over that cold air to the north. And it's going to start pulling some of that cold air downward, especially as we head towards Friday. We can see it's hovering around the US-Canada border, but that colder air is nearby. It's just having less of an impact right now because we have this very dynamic system to the south, with a warm front that's just pumping that warmer air northward. So you've got this battleground setting up, one low trying to drag the cold air in, while the low to the south brings the warmer air up. This means we're going to get another situation with a very sharp contrast between that warmer and colder air later next week. We're still keeping a close eye on the thunderstorm and severe weather risk down across the deep south. We're definitely going to continue to monitor that. We're also seeing snow showers, especially in the northwest, with rainfall. Continuing in the lower elevations, we do get a little bit of snowfall here for the plains and Midwest on the north side of this low that's over the central part of the country. Looking at Saturday, that system starts to fizzle out, and we see a bit of a pattern shift. We're getting colder air spilling over the top of the west. We've got some higher pressure building in, and that overall positive P&A pattern is still trying to take hold. This is still a very dynamic setup. There's not one single strong low here, but the big picture shows the jet stream dipping farther south, which generally means colder air for just about everyone, with an eastern Colorado low trying to form. This is set to dump heavy snow on the Rockies. Now, let's switch gears to the GFS model and jump ahead to the 25th to see what it's showing as we head into the following week. So, this would be next Monday, on the 24th. We can see that blob of warm air is kind of staying put out west, which is going to continue to steer most of the activity up and over the top, with a warm front that's just pumping that warmer air northward. So you've got this battleground setting up, one low trying to drag the cold air in, while the low to the south brings the warmer air up. This means we're going to get another situation with a very sharp contrast. And what do we see? Overall, we have this stretched out warm area out west, which again is helping to funnel all of this colder air down into that trough. The jet stream is firing off a couple of different systems into different areas. As you can see, they're riding right along that jet stream flow. This one is heading northward over the eastern states, bringing a lot of rainfall and even some snowfall to eastern Canada. And then we have this system right here, which is a pretty potent low for that area. And with that one, we're dealing with some Rocky Mountain and Canadian Plains snowfall with fewer impacts for the United States compared to Canada. So looking ahead to around Thursday, the 27th, we could see a low pressure system start to spin up right here. Now this is a classic setup, folks. We're talking snow up north, rain down south, but things really start to ramp up as we head into Friday, the 28th. That's what we've been dealing with, but it's getting a bit watered down by the warmth we've seen over the last few days. And that trend is set to continue for the next week or so, maybe even 10 days. After that, though, we do expect things to cool back down. But that's a pretty narrow band. The main story here is rain showers across a lot of the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Mid-Atlantic from that one. The Southwest especially, but really the whole West, is seeing this stormy pattern continue all the way through Tuesday. Now, let's take a look at Wednesday, the 19th. Instead, all the little pieces are moving along quickly, which means any snowfall you get might not last as long. But don't let that fool you, there's still potential for heavy snow packed in there, and underneath it all, the risk for thunderstorms and severe weather pops right back up with this one. We're also tracking a seriously dramatic Arctic blast that's pushing into the central states for now, and it's got its sights set on the east. So let's jump ahead to Saturday, because that's when things shift away from that fast-moving flow, and we transition into a more classic, long-duration snow threat here. So, looking ahead to around Thursday, the 27th, we could see a low-pressure system start to spin up right here. Now, this is a classic setup, folks. We're talking snow up north, rain down south, but things really start to ramp up as we head into Friday, the 28th, but that's a pretty narrow band. The main story here is rain showers across a lot of the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Mid-Atlantic from that one. The Southwest especially, but really the whole West, is seeing this stormy pattern continue all the way through Tuesday. Now, let's take a look at Wednesday, the 19th. This will be happening across the northern plains, the Great Lakes, and stretching into the northeast. I mean, this is just a powerful setup with some genuinely frigid air. Things do start to level out a bit as we get closer to December 1st, though. And with that one, we're dealing with some Rocky Mountain and Canadian Plains snowfall with fewer impacts for the United States compared to Canada. Let's see where the models agree. The GFS shows a snow system focused more on the northern plains and upper Midwest around the 26th. Then, it follows that up with that Arctic blast pushing into the east alongside a pretty significant snow event for the northern Rockies, northern plains, and upper Midwest. This is all happening as we close out November. Now, this GFS model run isn't showing quite as intense of an Arctic blast for the east, but it does show that flatter jet stream, which, once again, is sitting pretty far to the south, especially compared to where it is right now. You see that upper line on the map? That's where the jet stream typically likes to be in a flatter zonal flow. But in this forecast, it's cutting right across the middle of the country. And that position makes for a much more winter-like pattern, even for a flat jet stream. We're talking really cold for this time of year if that pans out. Okay, looking at total precipitation on the European model, it's clear the West is getting soaked. And now, a lot of the East is getting in on the action too. I don't think many folks are going to be complaining about a lack of rain or snow. Looking at the anomalies, how this compares to normal, some of the driest spots might be in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and the Southeast. But even there, we're talking just slightly below normal for precipitation. It's not a huge departure from average at all. On the flip side, we're seeing all these deep greens and blues out west, and especially in the east. And what do we see? Overall, we have this stretched out warm area out west, which again is helping to funnel all of this colder air down into that trough. The jet stream is firing off a couple of different systems into different areas. Now let's switch over to total snowfall on the European model. And again, you'll want to take this with a grain of salt for sure, because a lot of this is way out in the forecast. But what it does show is some heavy mountain snow piling up out west. And then things really start to get interesting for the plains, the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, and even the Appalachian Mountain Range, from the southeast all the way up through the mid-Atlantic and into the northeast. It's shaping up to be a pretty snowy end to November. And what do we see? Overall, we have this stretched out warm area out west, which again is helping to funnel all of this colder air down into that trough. The jet stream is firing off a couple of different systems into different areas, but then we warm right back up for the middle and end of the week. After that, another little cool down hits the east around the middle of next week, say Tuesday the 25th and Wednesday the 26th. Then another brief warm up, and then boom, here comes that very serious Arctic blast. And this is a textbook pattern. Warmer in the west, which we call a positive PNA, and a direct pipeline of cold air into the east. You can just see it a straight shot right from Northwestern Canada and Alaska, coming directly from the Arctic. So yeah, this model is showing a classic Arctic blast for the end of November. Now, let's look at the GFS model. It shows more of a back and forth. A little warmer, a little colder. It does eventually show an Arctic blast, but it looks a bit different. Again, the jet stream is flatter, so the cold is more spread out across the northern states. You get a pocket of warmth in the southwest and another in the southeast. So instead of that big seesaw pattern with cold plunging south in the east and warmth rising north in the west, the GFS shows the cold air more like a straight line across the country, just sitting much farther south than usual. That's my take on this GFS run for now. With all that said, if you're enjoying these updates, make sure you're subscribed, because we do this every single day. You can even ring that bell icon to get notified the second a new video drops so you'll never miss an update. And hey, if you got some value out of this, hit that like button for me. Drop a comment down below, and I'll see all of you in the next video.